Well, welcome out tonight. Thanks to those online and thanks to those that are here. We are here to talk about the upcoming legislative session. And my experience with the legislature, I guess, is that I'm an attorney, so I deal with a lot of the laws they write. But I also have been involved up there since about 2019, more actively. I did some things before that as well, but since then I've tried to be involved in the actual process of legislation, helping with drafting or ideas or testifying or different things. And so I wanted to give a little overview though of where we're kind of headed or where we've been. If you go back, you can actually pull up on the website that we'll go through in a little bit, the laws of Utah back to 2014. These are the ones that were passed in 2014. If you see up top, there were 2,469 pages in this file. Now, granted, not all of them are laws. They have some table of contents and things. But in 2023, we had 5,698 pages. And that tends to be the trajectory that we're on, except this year, it might be a little less. If I pull up, let's see. Maybe it will show this, maybe not. Let me try and expand this a little here. This shows the number of bill requests made. Whoa. Over the years, back to 2021 at least. Sorry, it's a very touchy zoom option here. So this was 2024, the green line, where they had quite a few requests for bills. You can see 2025 is the red line. We're below 2024, but we are above 2023, which is the blue line, which was the PDF file that we looked at and the number of bill requests. And this is per month tracking, and the year kind of follows the session. So this is January, and then this will be February. January is lower at the moment because it's not over yet. But you can see out of the bills that they request that get drafted, not all of these get sent to the public for review or comment or for voting on. Some of them are, the other requests are made, but then it's not sent through. But these are, again, just to get an idea, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of things happening in our state. And I'm curious if any of you have specific concerns or things that you're more concerned about this coming session or you want to focus on. And do any of you have any topics or bills that you've heard about or things that you would like to see up there?
Like for me, if you have anything to share about any upcoming bills about kids and what they're trying to implement.
So in relation to children?
Yeah.
Families, education, like education side or just kids, safety side or?
Safety side, anything that has to do with children.
Okay.
Potentially
harmful for the kids or families or?
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, there will be some bills. There's one called there's a push, I should say. I don't know if there'll be a bill called this, but there's a push nationally for a set of bills or a type of bill called the Make Homeschool Safe Act, where they want to be able to have more oversight over kids in homeschool. There was a child that was abused by his father and killed, Gavin Potter, I think, here in Utah, and it was homeschooled. And so they're concerned that, there needs to be some level of oversight there. And so there will be some that have been promised some legislation on that. So that will be something dealing with children and safety that we'll have to watch for. And not all the bills have been made public yet. So it's slightly early. And one of the things we will be doing next Thursday, I have a presentation on how to read legislation, where we go through that in detail. And then after that, we'll start meeting once a week to review the legislation as it comes through publicly, as it gets released. And so we won't be able to review everything, obviously, but we can review quite a bit of it. So we'll talk about those once they come out. Are there other things that people have? Susan, it looked like you had your hand up.
I'm interested in any election and campaign related bills.
Okay. Yeah, one of the first numbered bills in the Senate is an election bill. That one's already public. That's not their big one yet, but there will be quite a few of those. So there will be a lot to talk about there. Laura, what about you?
Mine was the same,
Okay.
the election.
All right, yeah, election campaign, it's a big one. I think that will be very important to watch, no matter how you feel about elections currently, they will likely change somewhat. And so it's wise to be involved and try and have a say in that, for sure. Let's see.
What about voting? Is there any bills on voting this year on Utah?
Yes, there will be bills on voting. They haven't all been released yet, but it is one of the big things that they are working on for sure. So they promised us voting bills. They promised us some public education bills. Promised some things with the children's safety type things. And then we have the mix of everything else that comes across too. So how many of you have been involved before at the legislature that are here? Or feel that you've actively been involved? We have one. Yeah, so we've got 2, 3 with some experience, and 4. The thing that surprised me, I think for Utah, was when I started, I don't know, probably started contacting my representatives maybe about 10 years ago, was when I finally started taking interest in local politics. And it was very concerning, I guess, in a way, but also helped me realize the impact we can have. My representative at the time, my House representative, told me that only about 30 constituents from his voting district would reach out to him per session. And so he said he took those people very seriously. And if they had an opinion on something, he tried very hard because his constituents didn't reach out to him. Now he had other groups, lobbyists and bigger groups that talked to him quite a bit, but he definitely paid attention to his constituents. And I went up there one bill that I really didn't want him to vote yes on, wanted him to vote no. Went up to the Capitol, sat by him on the floor when they're voting. He just pulled up another chair and I sat there with him and I said, "You're gonna vote no on this." And I said, "Austin, they told me I have to vote yes." And I said, "No, they're gonna vote no." And I pushed him really hard and he finally voted no on it. And he was really nervous too because they told him to vote yes. The bill still passed, ultimately. But again, it's just an example that as we work to have an influence and say things, changes can happen. And so I would encourage each of you this session to pick something that you care about and be involved with it. We'll see in a little bit that you can actually have a tracker for you. You can identify things that you want it to track and send you emails on. And they'll send you emails on bills, updates to bills, when the bills are in committee, different types of things, so that you don't have to watch the website and they'll just alert you to it, which is really nice. But one of the things I believe strongly is that our country can endure and survive. I believe very strongly that America is resilient, that there's a very strong spirit here. And if we do our part, that good will come from it. So with this, one of the reasons why I think I try and stay involved and encourage others to is from this quote from Gordon B. Hinckley. It says, "You are good, but it is not enough just to be good. You must be good for something. You must contribute good to the world. The world must be a better place for your presence. And the good that is in you must be spread to others." That's something I feel very strongly. This is, to me, what captures America, is that we can't just be good. We need to share that good. we need to contribute to the world around us, and living in a land of liberty gives us that option, and it gives us that responsibility even to make sure that we're involved and contributing. Ultimately, as an attorney, I went to law school to understand the law and spent 3 years in training with that. I've obviously worked in it for a long time after, but I believe very strongly that most people can understand the law and that they don't need significant legal training to understand most of what's going on with it. And so again, we'll focus on that a little bit more next Thursday when we talk. And that won't give you everything, but it'll give you a good foundation to be able to read some of the laws and have an idea of what's normal language, what's legal language, you know, how to navigate some of those things. But you certainly can understand a lot of it. And so I just ask that when we're here, we have respect for each other, we have civility, share your beliefs, share your opinions openly, but don't attack others, don't call names, and then listen to learn and not to attack others. I found that on social media, sometimes we love just to jump in and harp on people, and we kind of miss the whole point of building on a discussion rather than tearing down. So when we're here talking about the legislature, and we're talking about specifically what the legislature, the legislative branch does, and how it happens in Utah. So the legislative branch is broken up into the House of Representatives and the Senate. They make the laws. We have the executive branch that's a little part of this. And it's something to remember if you're trying to get a bill passed. You do need to probably consider the governor because he can sign or veto bills. And then we have the judicial branch as well, the courts that deal with laws as well. And sometimes we're too excited to get a law through and we don't think about what the courts will do with it. And that again can throw a roadblock in if you do all the work to get it through the legislature, get the governor to sign it, but you forget about the courts. So this is a little messy graphic on some of the checks and balances we have. Big picture. The big picture with the legislature, the House of Representatives, is that it has to pass both of them, the House and the Senate. In Utah, I think we have 75 House of Representatives and 29 senators that are elected. And so the Senate covers a little bit bigger area and there's more House members. Once it's approved by both, it goes to the governor for signing. The governor can veto it if he wants and send it back. If it's vetoed and 2/3 of the legislature agrees, they can override his veto and still make it a law. So if it's passed with a 2/3 majority, when it was initially passed, they call it a veto-proof majority because, yeah, it's pointless to veto it. But if it doesn't get passed with 2/3 majority, the governor could veto it. After this process, the courts won't get involved in things until it's made it through and become final. The law can be brought to the courts by either attorneys or the government or different parties. And the courts get to consider that law. So I guess that'd be number 5. They can strike it down as unconstitutional, or they can strike it down for not following legal requirements. Any of you know what 2 laws got struck down for not following legal requirements here in Utah recently? Amendments A and D on the ballot.
Right.
Those were actually passed through the legislature and passed to be put on our ballots to vote on. And the court said, you didn't follow the proper process for this, we're striking them. And the courts will do things like that. The legislature can control the courts. They get to make rules for the courts to an extent, and they get to allocate funds to the courts. And so there is that kind of check and balance both ways. And then the executive branch interacts with the courts by, they have to get certain things approved by the courts, such as warrants, arrests. The judges will issue those warrants quite often. But the executive branch, this is another avenue that people often don't consider with the law, or I shouldn't say avenue, but an issue that you have to think about. The executive branch ultimately chooses what laws they enforce. And they can opt not to enforce a law.
You mean even if a bill is passed?
Even if a bill is passed and the governor signs it, and it's constitutional, they can just say, we're not gonna do anything with this. And that happens sometimes.
Are they supposed to, and like, the legislature, or somebody could sue them for not doing so, or is it just up to them to do?
It's up to them. There's no mechanism right now to force them to enforce the law. Other than the legislature might be able to take away their funding. Or do different things. So the legislature tries to play some games. So for example, they passed a law that said cities need to put in affordable housing. And a lot of cities said, no, we don't care. And so the legislature had to come out with some type of mechanism to try and enforce it. And they said, well, we'll take away your funding for state roads if you don't follow this law. So there's this game back and forth that can get played with that. But no, you can't go to a court and make the executive branch enforce the law if they choose not to. Everything. It might benefit them. Yep. Yep. And this is when the legislature passes a law, they could choose to create some type of check and balance with it. But most laws in America are based on this notion that we just believe they're going to enforce it. But there was never a mechanism created to force them to do that. And this, if you've ever studied the case of Marbury versus Madison, this was the conundrum the Supreme Court found themselves in at the very beginning of America as to what they should do, because they knew if they ordered Thomas Jefferson to do something, he wouldn't do it.
So in other words, it's very important for the president to get the Congress and the Senate. Is that right?
To get them, what do you mean by get them?
The majority, that he will be able to get the laws passed that the president wants.
Well, not necessarily, because the president or the governor, the theory is that we've had 200 years of laws passed, and any new president or governor that comes in should enforce those laws. But there's also the theory that the founders said, but there should be checks and balances, and so the president or the governor can say, no, we don't like that law.
Wouldn't there be something 2/3 vote? If the bill is, if the governor does not sign the bill, and then the Senate can veto it by having a 2/3 vote. So let's say if the executive branch, the governor does not enforce the law, can the legislature, there's no avenue for the legislature to do anything about that?
Not currently. It could create something. I'm just explaining that they haven't in American history, because they didn't view it as, they viewed the oath of office as being the check and balance. When you take the oath of office, you say, I will uphold the laws of the land. And that was the check and balance for a long time, but more and more in our society, the oath means less and less.
Yeah.
And so it's no longer a strong check and balance on people, and we've never yet implemented a different check and balance. So we're currently in a place where they just don't enforce and you can't do much about it.
In every state.
Every state, and federally.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they could, the Senate could, and House legislative could do something about that now that we're seeing that it's a commission.
They could. Yeah, and they'd have to choose to do things within the constitutional realm, and it'd probably deal with funding and different things like that, mechanisms they have. You see this though, the fact that the executive chooses. We have a term for this in current politics. When a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state is created, what does it mean? It means we're not enforcing the law. And we publicly said it. We publicly said, I'm not going to enforce this law. You're a sanctuary, come here. We don't care what the law is, we're not going to enforce it. So that when you see the term sanctuary, we're dealing with this number 7 issue right here, that they're just choosing not to enforce the law even though it was passed. And that, so that's a good question. There's this fascinating, I actually think it's fascinating. Maybe it's not to anyone else. If you go through what the law actually is, there is almost no agreement among academics on what the law is. Because at the end of the day, there's all these checks and balances and things at play. And so what gets enforced, what doesn't, even if there is a lot of the executive branch enforces, we don't talk about some of the checks and balances here. There's things like jury nullification, where the jury can say, I don't care what the law is, I'm not gonna find you guilty of it. The judges sometimes say, yeah, I don't care, I'll kick this case out. And there's all types of different pressure points as to what the law is or isn't. And there's a lot at work and a lot at play in this system. And it's a great discussion to get into about, well, why do we pass laws? The reason we do is because I'd say probably 95% of them matter. But there is this 5% or so, maybe it's even less than that, that get caught up in the political gamesmanship of what goes on. And that's something that shapes America quite a bit. And again, I actually think the founders intended that to an extent. They wanted some measure of checks and balances and fluidity and things, not this just absolute. But we're seeing it more and more. And there's more and more calls for for states to nullify federal law. So for example, Carrie Ann Lisenby, I think one of the representatives, sponsored a bill that said her proposal was that no Utah state official could enforce any federal gun laws. Her proposal was to make Utah a federal gun sanctuary state, essentially. And there's more and more calls for things like that, where people are saying, well, we don't have to enforce this law, we don't have to do that. Some cities will say that, and they'll play this game back and forth. And so the law is somewhat fluid. The law is not concrete all the time.
Does it mean that the executive branch makes a decision not to follow this, not to enforce this law? Then
They never bring it to the court.
but somebody can bring it to the court.
Not all of us. The individuals in America can only bring laws to court to enforce if they have what's called a private right of action. But there are many laws that only the government can enforce, not private individuals.
I always have the thought, why don't the people, us, class action lawsuit against the federal government on the open border? I kept thinking about this, so it does not work.
No,
It can't be done.
no, people don't get to enforce the immigration laws. And the other thing to know about the government, if you want to sue them, the government gets to decide when it's liable for something and when it's not. And so federal government has this and the state government has this that says, it's called the Government Immunity Act. And it says, we're immune from everything. You can't sue us for anything unless we've said it here. These are the things you can sue us for. And not enforcing the law is not one of the things you can sue them for. So that's one of the places we're at still.
So am I still by to the government?
Nope, not for that. Nope, those are things that there's a lot of, they call it sovereignty, and a lot of immunity. And one of the things to understand about the executive branch here, so the Attorney General in Utah is the main, you could say, liaison with the courts. And the Attorney General is responsible for enforcing the laws of the state of Utah and bringing them to court. The Attorney General and prosecutors in Utah have absolute immunity. They can't be sued. They can't be sued for malicious prosecution, meaning prosecuting you when they know that you're innocent. And they can't be sued for not prosecuting. So there could be an open criminal and they could choose to let them go. And you can't do anything about it. And that's just one of the places we're at. And that's the same nationwide, state and federal government. Prosecutors have absolute immunity.
But the state prosecutor then have actually a lot of power.
A lot of power.
But
Right,
they have to
yeah.
do what the governor said. Like, what if the governor and the attorney general don't?
Don't get along.
If you have to do what the governor says.
So the prosecutor does not have to do what the governor says. the AG in some situations can choose to take over for a prosecutor. So we saw this in, what state was it? It was, oh, I'm trying to remember the situation. It was just in the news recently. There was a prosecution. And, oh, it was the police officer. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was in Missouri. Police officer threw a man to the ground that had touched him. And he, I think, broke the guy's back or neck or something and his wrist. He was an older gentleman. And the city prosecutor prosecuted the police officer for assault. And the guy didn't die, but he's really messed up. The attorney general stepped in on that one and said, we're taking over this case. And then they dismissed the charges against the police officer. And in that situation, the local prosecutor was pulled from the local prosecutor and they couldn't continue. But the governor can't make that decision. The governor technically doesn't control the AG's office. No, in theory, they're supposed to be independent. And so the AG and the governor can be on very different pages about what they're doing or not doing.
What the governor.
It's very helpful if you're the governor. So it's very helpful if you have that for sure. But again, when you look at these things, there are some areas where I don't think that the founders fully thought through all checks and balances. And I think this is one area. And the other one is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't have decent checks and balances on it either, I don't think.
Can a constitutional amendment be made to governor?
Yes, about both of these as it relates, but that would be quite the battle to try and get that through right now with how politicized the courts become. But these are two areas, the executive branch and the Supreme Court, that kind of, I'd say, probably got a little bit lost in the shuffle. Because even if you read the case of Marbury versus Madison and where the Supreme Court's at currently, the founders hadn't created a court that's like the court we have today. The Supreme Court created that itself in the case of Marbury versus Madison as a solution to solve some of the issues that arose in these cases, and with Thomas Jefferson being this type of executive that says, I don't care what you tell me to do. And so the Supreme Court was wrestling with some, I'd say, concerning issues for America. And their solution to it was to take on a lot of power. And it was respected by everyone. And it kind of became the way it was since then. But to change it now would require a constitutional amendment for sure. But again, this is just to give kind of a big picture overview of the whole process, because you can do all the work over here in the House and then end up with the governor saying no, or the court saying no, or all types of things along the way. So there's a lot of moving parts. But in general, the legislative process is that a person has an idea. This could be you. I want you to understand, as being part of this, that you can propose legislation. You go talk to a rep. Even if they don't want to run your idea, they will often tell you someone that may be willing to. And sometimes they'll tell you, whoa, that's a political bomb. I don't want to touch it. No one up here wants to touch that this year. So for example, if you went and said, oh, I want to do sales tax on service, they'd all say, no, we got spanked on that a couple of years ago. We're not going to touch that again for a little while. But in general, you go talk to them about your idea. You find a representative that can run this. Now, when you talk to representatives, it can be helpful to know who has a little more clout or who doesn't. There are some representatives that no matter how good their bill is, it probably won't pass because they've offended most everyone up there. And there is a system at the Capitol where there is some level of, if you don't scratch our back, we won't scratch your back type feeling. And so sometimes you can find a rep to run your bill, but they may not have any clout and it may not go anywhere. And so it is helpful to ask around to get an idea of the reputation the person has, how much influence they potentially have. But even reps with little to no influence, new reps, they can often get bills passed that aren't political nightmares for people. And so if you have a decent idea or something that should be done, you can often get that done.
You go to a rep, is that somebody in the House of Representatives, the Senate doesn't do this,
Sorry, when I say rep, it's just short for either.
either one. You can
Yeah.
Go to either one.
You can talk to the senator or the House rep. The House tends to put out more bills because there's more of them. There's 75 as compared to 29. And they tend to be more receptive to talking to you because their areas are smaller, so they have fewer constituents as well. But you can talk to any rep, whether or not they're your representative or senator. And another thing that people often feel, I get contacted quite often, people saying, "Hey, can you help me draft this legislation?" And I say, well, no matter how much work we put into it beforehand, and no matter how nice we make it, once you send it to the drafting attorneys, they do it all themselves anyways. They redraft it, they do their own language. They're trained, they spend 2 years in training before they draft a bill. Learning how to draft legislation, go through the process in Utah and things. And so anything that comes to them, they will redraft. And I've even sent them just a 1-line change we're putting in a bill. So this is the change you want, they redraft it. And once they redraft it, you can push back and say, no, go back to what we sent you. But they have to do their process at first. And so that one was, it was a 1-line, go back to what we sent you. And that one did pass. But no. So they work for the Office of Legislative Counsel and Research, they call it. But they are non-elected officials. They're hired and trained specifically. And then they are each trained in a particular area of code or law. And so depending on your topic, you'll get assigned to a certain attorney that specializes in that area of law.
You know, like, there's only a few drafts.
There's a decent, I don't know the exact number, but I guess few, it's, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's probably more than 20.
Are they like people?
No, they're supposed to be politically neutral. That's the claim. And they have to be that I went to a presentation once by the office, and they say that if you apply, that one of the specific things they grill you on is whether you can draft legislation for a topic you entirely disagree with, because you are not allowed to opt out of drafting something based on how you feel about it. And so if the attorney is against your political viewpoints, you will actually, I think, and it's not supposed to be part of the feedback or process, but you will see it play in. That you can see some of that creep in. I think that's natural. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. But the feedback they'll give to the representative sometimes is very much slanted for the concerns or the language type thing. But I think in general, they do a pretty good job.
The best way to get a hold of it. And part of that is knowing which one has been cloud and taken away and it doesn't be.
Yeah, so we'll go to I'll take you through the website in a minute where you get the contact information and things for representatives. But the question about how to know which one has more clout, the easiest way is just to call up your representative and say, who has the most clout with education? Just ask them. And they'll tell you pretty openly who it is. I'd say that most do. There are some. I've reached out. I had a senator representative. She would never respond to me, ever. But almost everyone I reach out to is responsive. And maybe she didn't respond to me because her and I never agreed on anything. But that certainly may influence things.
You experience with a representative that you contact to share an idea for them to draft the bill, who is not, you're not the constituent. Do they receive it well, or do they?
They do, generally. Yeah, if you talk to your representative that you're there, when you're their constituent, they will usually direct you to the right person to talk to if it's not them. And then if it's coming from your representative to another representative, they usually receive you pretty well. But many of them, again, they don't have tons of people reach out on things. And if you reach out on a topic they're interested in and you have a valid point to make, they're often quite interested in doing it. And so, for example, one time I was talking to a group there's a group that was involved in something particular, and I had learned about a law that Louisiana had passed, and I thought, oh, this is a good idea. And I asked the lady on the phone, I said, hey, what do you think about this? She says, oh, that would be amazing. Let me text this guy right now that we work with often. And she sends him a text, and while we're on the phone, he texts back, I'm opening a bill file on it, which means he sent it to drafting council and asked them to draft it. That's how fast it was, because he liked the idea and just ran with it super quick. Other times, you're talking more, explaining more, different things. But again, and right now, if you were to go today and try and run in with a bill idea, it's very hard to get it at this point, because the drafting attorneys have about 1,000 bills on their plate that they're trying to draft right now. And right now, if you send a new bill in for drafting, the chance of it getting out before the end of session is low, just with how many bills they have. And so anything you're thinking about, I'd say be involved this legislative session, get a feel for it. But then anything you're thinking about, wait about 3 or 4 weeks after the session ends so your representative can kind of recover. It's a grueling process for them for 45 days. But then just reach out. And you can start this process really early and have a bill all ready for next year on these things. And it's, again, the year goes by quickly. It will come fast. But once this happens, so once drafting council gets it, they will do their thing, create the draft. You don't have to pay for that. And they send it back to the representative. The representative can designate you as a person that gets the bill file as well. So you get to see the confidential drafts of it back and forth before that goes public. And you can participate and contribute on that. Once it's approved and found to be good, the bill is made public and numbered, and then the public can see it. After that, the bill goes to the Rules Committee, and the House and the Senate both have a Rules Committee. And Rules is the most powerful committee because it gets to decide which committee it sends the bill to for a hearing. And so sometimes they know that a certain committee will kill it, or they know that a certain committee will pass it, and they'll play around with that some on bills they like or don't like. And so the rules, the people in Rules, if you really want your bill passed, get one of the people in the Rules Committee to sponsor your bill. They'll make sure it goes to the right committee to pass, right? After this, so the bill gets assigned to a committee. So you have committees on budget, you'll have committees on education, you'll have committees on business, you'll have committees on health, different things. And if your bill falls under one of these topics, it'll get sent to that committee. And in the committee, there's usually, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 14, 15 representatives or senators that sit on it. And they will hold a hearing on the bill. And committee is one of the most important places for you to be involved. The public can be involved by either attending in person like this. You'll come to a room. A lot of the committee rooms might be a little bit bigger than this up there. Some of them are a lot bigger. If they're considering a bill that's contentious, they'll put it in a bigger committee room. The other ones that don't get very many people being smaller ones. And you'll be shocked if you go up there. There will be super important bills going through and nobody commenting on them. No one even there. It's just going on through. And so you can go to these committees and you can even join the committees online. So we have people that have joined online tonight. You can do the same with all the committees. Once COVID came, Utah did their online process and you can be involved. You can just join basically a Zoom call and you can testify. You can share your thoughts and opinions on whether they should or shouldn't support it. If it's a super contentious bill that a lot of people are testifying on, you may not have time. They will limit the time sometimes. But typically you have anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes to speak. Unless you've been invited by the bill sponsor to testify about it and explain certain things, then you have more time. And if you start talking to representatives and care about something, have experience with something, they often ask you to come up and share. And it's a good experience, I'd say, to go up and testify to something. If the committee does not like it though, and they vote against it, the bill usually dies at that point before it gets to the full House or the full Senate. And so you have to get through that group. So you have Rules Committee, you have to pass it through, and then you have the committee itself. and you try and talk to those reps, and you can reach out to them before the hearing, you can email them, you can try and call them, talk to them about it. If the committee though votes in favor of it, it goes to the entire House or the Senate for the vote. This depends on where it started. So if you started your bill with the House rep, then it will go to the House. If you started your bill with the Senate, it goes to the Senate first. And go ahead.
How are the committee members selected?
They are selected by party leadership essentially. So every time there's an election and all the new people come in, they redo committee assignments and you get assigned.
Every representative or every senator is part of the committee?
Yes, at least one. Yep. So you get at least one committee assignment. And again, the more you kind of become respected in the ranks, the more clout you have, the more important committees you get assigned to, generally. And so it's one of the big things in politics is trying to get on certain committees because you have more power there. It's one reason why Orrin Hatch always said to re-elect him, because he was on some of the most powerful federal committees. And if you elected a new senator, they wouldn't be on those same powerful committees. And so that was one of the draws for people to vote for him. They had moved up the ranks, essentially. And this process is very similar at the federal level. And then once the House or Senate passes it by a majority vote, it then gets sent to the other group. And it goes into a committee in the other group at first, and that committee can kill it even after the House voted for it. And I had a bill we were working on trying to get passed. The House voted overwhelmingly in favor of it. It went to the Senate committee. And the head of the Senate committee was the most powerful senator, and he didn't like the bill, and he said no. And it killed it on that committee. So even though it would have passed, most likely in the Senate, would have passed the House, we couldn't get it out of that Senate committee with that one, and that bill died. But we're bringing it back this year. He's not in anymore.
Is there an expiration date or the length of period a committee exists?
So yeah, the committees are organized for each legislative session. So they'll be for 2024, 2025. Yeah, I mean, they're the same name, but then the assignments to them can get reassigned for each session. Yeah. And the website will show you that too, the committee assignments. You can see that there. Yeah, so again, that'll be the website. I will show you the website. We're going to go through the website. Utah has a great website. So I don't know what your political leanings are, how much you like or dislike Utah politics, but the legislature has done a great job with its website. So they have an incredible website. No, it's all publicly available. You can just walk into the committee. Yep. Some of the things they will request that you sign in, like they have this little paper at the front and you can sign it to say, I want to testify on a certain bill. But yeah, you just go up, and most of the time they say, is anyone here to testify on this bill? And you raise your hand and they say, come on up. That's how it works most of the time. Pretty informal. And again, the reason is so few people in Utah are involved. And this is why just being here, you can have a big influence on things. And even I taught a class on the law to some junior high and high school age kids when Utah was passing the legislation that said that social media accounts couldn't go to minors unless a parent opted in with consent. And there was a 13-year-old very upset about this, and she went up to the Capitol and testified and said, don't take my social media away from me. They listened to her. They still voted to take it away from her. And we have the part, again, where the courts now got involved in that. So if we go back to that thing, the triangle courts have stopped that law so far. So that law is not effective yet because the courts are involved there. But as a 13-year-old, she was up there and they had a lot of respect for her for being up there and caring. And so, yes, one of the things to understand is just because you go up doesn't mean for sure you'll be able to sway the vote, the total vote, but you'll have an input in the process. And at some point your input will help determine the course that things go. Another fun thing to remember about the legislative process is, let's say you propose a bill, you've got the language perfect, gone back and forth with drafting council, you send it to committee or to the House or Senate, whatever to vote on. They can propose amendments at any time. And it's not hard to do. And they can do a floor vote really quick and just change things like that. And so this is one of the areas where sometimes when you're being politically savvy, you have to kind of anticipate what they will or won't change. And they can completely flip a bill where if you're saying, we want to make it so that the government shall do this, they can just add the word not and say the government shall not do this, and it changes your whole bill really quickly. And so sometimes one of the ways to kill a bill is to insert an amendment like that, and then everyone votes no on it. There's different games that are played, and you have to be patient being involved in the legislative process. But overall, I'd say still that probably, I don't know what the percent is, 70-80% of the time, it still goes pretty predictably. You get some wild stuff that comes in. If there are amendments though, once it's in the House or once it's in the Senate, so if the first body voted for it and it goes to the second and they amend it, it has to go back to the first body to vote on with the amendments. You have to get a vote on the exact same language before it goes to the governor. So it can bounce back and forth between them as there's amendments back and forth. And it's possible to run out of time because our legislative session is 45 days. And if your bill doesn't get to a final point before the 45 days is up, your bill dies. That's just how it goes. And so there is a timing aspect to this. And one of the fun things to know too is that the last 2 or 3 days of session, they have all these rules for committees and different things. They'll just suddenly vote and suspend all the rules. And then all the bills can come in without committee vote, without these other things. And they do all kinds of crazy stuff when they suspend the rules. So again, when you ask about what the law is and what the rules are, why do we have them? Well, we have it for most of the time, except for the last 2-3 days. And then we do what we want. It's kind of a wild game, but you'll see it. Again, I'd say it can be discouraging, but don't get discouraged by it because it happens every year and it's part of the game that gets played.
You mentioned if an amendment gets added and I can push it back and you said kill the bill. Does that mean for this session, or if you want to bring it up next session, you have to go through the whole, I mean, obviously it has to go through again, but can it be tabled for the next year? Or is it like, has to be redrafted?
Yeah, it's a good question. So most of the time, if your bill doesn't get through, it has to be redrafted and go through the whole process again. But occasionally they will send something to what they call interim. And so between legislative sessions, they have what's called interim committees that meet, and their job is to study things and make recommendations for the next legislative session. If your bill gets sent to interim, there's a chance that they revive it and bring it back. If it doesn't get sent to interim, though, it's dead, and you have to go through the process again. So the interim committees meet throughout the year and go through things. One of the things too to understand about the importance of overriding a veto, you have to do it before any legislation that you're concerned the governor will veto needs to be passed before the last 10 days of the session, because the governor can wait 10 days before he signs or vetoes a bill. And so if he waits till the day after session to veto your bill, you can't override his veto on it. And so you have essentially a 35-day window to get legislation passed that the governor may veto. And so the representatives, if they know the governor might not like something, will try and pass it sooner in the session, get it vetoed, and then override it. But anything going through the last 10 days could be killed by the governor. Because he just has to wait till the session's over.
So we can just let it sit on the desk for 10 days.
Yep. Yep. If he goes 11 days, the bill's considered accepted. So he has 10 days if he's going to veto it. But yes, he can just wait till the 10th day till the session's over. So you have this thing about making sure you get it through on time if the veto's a concern. In Utah, the governor passes most everything that comes his way. Only vetoes a couple things generally. the Utah government tends to work very well together. Probably not the best thing, but they do. There's not a ton of pushback between the legislature and the executive branch. So just real quick, couple things. It can get very tempting to, tell your representative, I'm not going to vote for you if you vote this way. They know that you're not going to vote for them if you're telling them you disagree with them on a bill. And saying things like that generally isn't helpful. If you have the power to actually sway the vote, they will know you. They will know that already. You don't have to tell them. And threatening them with it doesn't help, doesn't go anywhere. They are human. Most of them are trying very hard. And they certainly appreciate respect.
Or Sean, really learn how to
No.
you learn how to coach professionally. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. And so again, there is an aspect of learning, but I think that part of the process is understanding that even if you articulate something that they don't agree with, and they still vote opposite of what you wanted, it's not uncommon for that to still percolate, that message, and to still grow and turn into something. We see this often. It's one reason why judges write dissents and dissenting opinions. It's not uncommon for their dissenting opinion to become persuasive and eventually overturn something later. And so they will take the time to voice their thoughts and opinions because it does help to shape things. And even sometimes you may not get the bill stopped, but you can get them to adjust it, lessen its impacts or the concerns you have, that type of thing. So on the professional side, it's helpful to give for or against, not just to say, don't do this. But one of the things to know, this was from, I think this was 2023 when this happened. They had so many bills come across their desk for consideration that this is a report from KSL. KSL said the average time they had to deliberate on a bill in the session was 10 minutes. And they had situations where a senator got up and if you go up and watch, they have computer screens for everyone. So they're all sitting there at their desks in the rooms. They have these screens. And when the bill comes up for consideration, the bill actually pops up on their screen. And the senator gets up and he says, okay, we're here to vote on this bill. He reads it. He says, this is what it's for. And the Senate votes unanimously to pass it. He sits down and then he looks down and realizes he got up and read the wrong bill. And so he actually had the honesty to stand back and say, well, sorry, I just lied to you. That's not what we were voting on. Let's try this again. But the concern was that KSL noted every senator with the bill on their screen in front of them voted for it, and none of them realized he was reading the wrong bill. But this is how fast they're often going through things. And so sometimes, again, one of the things that can shape what happens with this is if you can put in a piece of valuable information and just say, hey, did you know this bill does this? It can suddenly put a pause on things and they go, whoa, let's circle this. Circling means we're putting a pause on it. We're going to, investigate this one more. Let's put it aside. And sometimes if you can get a bill circled and a concern raised, it will help. Maybe they'll never get back to it because they're so busy type thing. So these are things to understand is that, my wife, to share something, she one time was looking through a bill. I had already looked through it. And she looked down and goes, wait a minute. She said, wouldn't this stop this group from doing their thing? It was a nonprofit group that was doing some stuff here in Utah. And she goes, wouldn't this stop them from doing that? And I looked at it and I said, oh, that would totally kill them and everything they're doing. And so she calls them up, the nonprofit. She says, hey, there's this bill. We've got to try and stop it somehow. It's going to kill you guys. And they start freaking out. They're like, well, we can't be involved lobbying. We don't know what to do. And so my wife called one of the main senators. And she managed to get him on the phone. She called his number, he answered, and they were about to vote on it. And she said, hey, just so you know, there's this massive issue, this one line totally shuts down this nonprofit. And he just said, oh, totally see the issue. We'll do a floor amendment, no problem. He amended it, and like that nonprofit was able to stay in. And that was just one person. I had read it as an attorney, I didn't catch it. She read it as a layperson and totally caught it. And this is why we need multiple eyes on things for sure. But again, saying things like that is helpful. You can certainly say what you believe, but if you have a point, it can be good. And then mocking, calling names doesn't help. One thing I do want to say is one of the ways they try and get you to stop resisting them on certain things is to say, oh, come up and meet with us. And they give you what's called access. Because it makes you feel special, and then you may feel like you have to start playing more along the lines. And again, you don't have to be mean, but the access is sometimes used to say, oh, you got to understand, we can't do that this time because you want to keep your relationships good for this next time type thing. And so don't believe you're anything special if you're given access. You can be asked to testify, different things. And yeah, it doesn't mean that you have great standing with them or any of that. They will play that game. They'll grant you access, make you feel special for a time, whatever. You can use that to your benefit, for sure. Get access at times on things. But I'm just saying, but don't let it go to your ego and you start believing that you can now go tell everyone else what they need to do because you met with someone who testified.
They may be using.
And they may be using you. It's not uncommon. So they play a game with us and we try and play the game back, right? But they have done it a lot more, so they tend to be a little more professional with it. So I just throw that out. But let's check out the website here. So the website is at le.utah.gov. And if we go back to the home, this is what you come to. I visit this site in my line of work probably more than any other site here often. But you can, when you come here, you can come on over to legislators and you can go through. You can find them by address, by map. So if you want to type in your address to see who your reps are, it will bring them up. You can go alphabetical, historical. You can find all the ones from anciently. You can go by ones that were in certain sessions, however you want to find them. And you can go to the House specifically. They will show you who the elected leadership is with this. So for example, if you want to go to the roster for the House, you can look at it by party. You can sort certain ways. You can have a table view of it. And they will go through and show you each district. And so if you have someone you want to contact, you just click on them. They have a phone number, an address, and an email. Some of them list their cell phones. Not all of them, but some of them list their cell phones. And then they usually have a le.utah.gov email. But one of the really cool things is if you're trying to figure out who your rep is or what kinds of things they care about, you can view their sponsored legislation to see what your rep is doing. So this is 2025. And this rep is sponsoring these numbered bills. And then he has these other bills in process right now. Meaning they'll probably be numbered soon. They'll probably be numbered soon. So what this is, if you look at the bill file explanation, it's still with the drafting attorneys, but it plans to be released publicly and become numbered at some point. But again, it's helpful. Come on here. I can't change tabs with that up there. Let's see. Maybe I can do this. Bring it down. Yeah, so this is actually really helpful to see what they're up to, what they care about. And if you have a bill you're trying to get through, what they may care about. If they're opposition and they have something they care about, maybe you can find ways to, work out some type of deal or whatever. But this is very nice sometimes just to pull that up for this. This is under bills and 2025 bills, but you can go and view legislation by session. They go back to 1990 on this website. They have archives that you can get into for 1896. But if you want to see what Keith Grover's been up to, again, you can pull it up here. And that's one way to go about it. So here, again, it's just helpful to get in. You can go here and type in street address and see who it is that is responsible for you. They have the maps here. You can look by certain districts. Again, Utah tries to make it pretty user-friendly, and it's pretty easy to navigate.
I was gonna say something else that seemed to work for me was finding someone who didn't have a lot going on compared to maybe because the thing that I was involved in was of little consequence. And so maybe it would be hard to find someone specifically who's dabbling on your issue or whatever. But he was also looking for a win to kind of build some of that clout as well.
Yeah,
And so didn't have very much going on. So he was eager to.
jump on that.
Yeah.
And I did see a news article of someone doing that, that it's legal. Matt helped make free haircuts legal in Salt Lake County. And Matt's a barber. And Salt Lake County actually had a rule that you couldn't offer free haircuts unless you were doing it in a licensed facility. And so Matt got a rule passed that you could do free haircuts for free without the government being involved.
You mean if my neighbor is willing to give me a haircut, it cannot be done actually?
Has to be in a licensed facility before this law, before the change. It was pretty wild. And it didn't exempt homes. It didn't exempt any of that. It just said any haircut, even if free, has to be in a licensed facility.
Awesome.
We can have free haircuts legally. We're no longer breaking the law here.
Where are you getting your free haircuts from?
But there was a KSL News article about a man offering free haircuts here in Salt Lake County, and I went,
Yeah,
Look at that.
Even better. It used to be illegal probably.
he probably did not. But he's not going to jail anytime soon, so that is nice. But yes, but you can look at that, and that is true. You can say, my bill's not gonna be of great import up there, so find someone that doesn't have a lot going on. And that can be very helpful, because then some of them are looking for things to be involved in. If they can say, hey, I helped pull back the government regulation, it's a win for them, right? So that is fun. Then you can come to bills. And if you click on bills, eventually this 2025 session will, it shows up there. That's interesting. Once you click on bills. If you clicked on legislators, it just changed. It was 2024. I don't know if you saw that before. So maybe they are actively updating the site as we go. But if you just click on bills in general, you can go look at all the different sessions. Utah will have special sessions where they call the legislature back in session to vote on a bill or 2 or 5 or 10, whatever they feel like. I don't know yet how they choose what number to call it. So 2024 didn't have a first and second special session, but it had a third and fourth. Now, maybe they had it and didn't vote on any bills. I don't know exactly what happens there. Maybe. But 2020, they have a third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I don't know what happened to first and second, but sometimes they have first and second. So that piece I don't understand yet. There's still some areas up there that I don't fully know. But as you watch it, you can go through that. But you can click on 2025 general session. And then it'll give you these plus signs because, and this is actually, wow, this is crazy. I looked at this earlier today. We had not yet got to 100 bills, but now we're at over 100 bills out already. But you click on the plus. And you will see, they never have 1, they always start at 11. And that's pretty common. They always say HB 1 to 49, but it starts at 11. So these are bills that are currently been proposed. And so some of you had talked about voting. There's HB 27, voting precinct amendments, child welfare reporting amendments. So that'd be one. Representative Birkeland, though, she's resigned. And so I don't know what will happen entirely with this bill, if it will continue or not. She is due to be replaced this week or next week, I think, this weekend.
Is
So-
Is there a way to get to the bill on, to all the bills on a particular subject matter? Let's say children bill.
Yeah. So the subjects, you have to understand that if you go by subject, it can be a little, maybe they get it, maybe they don't. But if you want that type of thing, what you do is you come to bills. Oh, sorry, I'm not very good with my left hand. Try this right-handed. And you say tracking service. This one you actually have to sign in for. But if you put in your email and a password, they will email you specifically on your favorite subjects or code sections. So you can identify subjects. And as long as the bill gets tagged with that subject, it's going to come across to you in the notifications.
Because sometimes I find that the title of the bills can be misleading.
So yeah, think about the political process.
What is it, the Inflation Act bill, right? I mean, that title is totally just the opposite.
Yeah, so think about it like a news headline. If you're a rep and you've got 10 minutes to look at a bill, what are you gonna look at? The headline and this, right? So yes, the naming of the bill can be part of the game, what you call it. Utah played this game and so Utah has another constitutional requirement that the federal government doesn't have. Utah says that you can only have 1 subject per bill. So you can't have motor vehicle amendments put with education and lumped all together with all these bills, and you have to vote yes or no on just the whole package. They're supposed to have just 1 subject per bill. So, well, so this is where they play the game. So one of the games they played with, they had the Utah Fits All Scholarship that they passed, which was giving money to private schoolers and homeschoolers. And the way they got that to pass was they coupled it with raising pay for teachers. I think it's very likely that if that were challenged in court, the court would say that's 2 subjects, you can't do that, and strike it down. But they passed it. The name of the bill was Increased Funding for Education. And so they said it's 1 subject because we're just increasing funding here and here, and we can do that because it's 1 subject. So they play the game. And it's up to people in Utah to file a constitutional lawsuit and say, well, you didn't do that correctly. There's been about 5 or 6 times in Utah history when people have sued over a 2-subject bill and had it struck down.
So the people can sue.
The people can sue over that one because that's a constitutional requirement,
Can sue.
the law to have it struck down. Yeah. So that's one area where the people have a check and balance to follow the Utah Constitution on the multiple subjects. Now, again, there's always a debate. Is it more than 1 subject? Is it not? Some bills are incredibly long and touch a lot of areas. And whether a court says it's 1 subject or not, that's debatable. But that was one that they certainly finagled the best they could. And again, you'll see that sometimes. Usually when they're doing that, it means it's a contentious issue. And they're trying to get people to come along or do that. But this is a really powerful way to stay involved without feeling like you have to just be checking back at the website all the time for whatever's coming up and scrolling through all the bills and things that come. Go in and tell them what you care about.
See emails when a committee meeting is scheduled.
Yeah. So they'll tell you as soon as the bill gets scheduled for committee, you get an email, boom, and it's scheduled and you know instantly. You don't have to follow or check back in. So this is helpful because what they do with committees, one of the games they play is they'll wait and wait and wait and then schedule it the day before. Sometimes you don't know it was scheduled for committee. So if you get the email as soon as it's scheduled, you'll have an idea of that when it gets scheduled. So if you go to bills and then tracking.
Can it also sometimes be the day of too?
Yes, it can be the day of. Let's see, bills tracking service. You see that there? That's tracking service. And again, that's super helpful. To know. Now, when we look at bills, let's just pulse one up here. We'll go through this a little bit more. But let's see, there's another one that you may be interested in, child abuse and torture amendments, SB 24. There's one I was looking for.
Let's look at election bills.
I'm gonna pull up an election bill. I know there's one at, let's see, election fundraising amendments. Ooh. See what they're doing here. So, okay, couple things to know. When you click on a bill, it will show the bill sponsor. So this is the representative or senator that's agreed to have their face on it. They're the ones pushing it. It's assigned to them. Right now, we only have a Senate sponsor. It says Senator Daniel McKay. But ultimately, if this bill goes to the House, it has to have a House sponsor as well. And so you'll see a second sponsor appear here. And those are the two main points of contact on the bill. Again, you can just click on their name to get their contact information. It tells you who the drafting attorney is. You can actually start to watch drafting attorneys and their styles if you want. Bills have what's called fiscal analysts to analyze the monetary impact it has. And if you're here, you can just click on track this legislation as well and add it in and you can sign in and just add it in automatically to what you're tracking. It will show here, they show current version, text introduced. If there's been amendments, those amendments will display here. And will tell you which version of this it's displaying. And it's usually the current most accepted version. You may have amendments that got rejected that appear down here, or previous versions before that have now been overturned because of an amendment. Those will be tracked there.
Just go, what I've been doing all along is I just go to the latest amendment and that's it. I ignore the previous amendment. Is that correct?
So you can, if you want to know where it is currently, you can ignore all the previous stuff, for sure. If you want to know what's happened with it though, through the process, you can go back to it and see the amendments and follow those, if that's important to you for any reason. Most of the time though, when you click on this, it's going to show you the most current version.
Because when they pass it, they will be voting based on the most current amendment. They don't go back to the original bill to pass.
They can, because if they rejected a current amendment, it can go back to the original.
Can I tell
Which one it's on?
which one?
Yeah, so they will have, again, here on the right, they'll say that and they'll say what's happened with each one. And the current status of it. And one of the things, let's see here. If you go up to status right here, instead of bill text, and click on status, it will show you every vote that's taken place on every amendment and everything. And you can see where it is. So right now it's waiting for introduction in the Senate, which means we're just waiting for the session to start.
Right now, every bill, 2025 bill will be like this.
Yes. Yeah, everyone will have the same thing, bill text, status, and hearings and debate. And then you can click on the hearings and debate link. And you can actually watch the video. They'll link back to it. You can watch the video for the debate that took place on it and see what happened. So again, Utah makes it very user-friendly to follow. You just, as long as you remember there's status, bill text, and hearings up here. It's super nice. So this is an interesting bill to look at. So when they put up a bill, and we'll go through this a lot more on Thursday next week, how to read these things. But for the website purposes, the bill will have what they call highlighted provisions. So they have kind of the title, and then they have a summary, a short summary of what's happening. So this bill is proposing to So there were some prohibitions before on when you can make campaign contributions to federal office. It's proposing to lift that. And then they want to make it a crime to make a federal contribution with the intent to influence the governor or a state official to take or not take an action, or to reward the governor or a state official for taking or not taking action.
You know that.
But just kind of a feel good deal.
Yeah, I mean.
So think about this. So this, who is this here? This McKay? So Daniel McKay has identified that we have an issue of people making federal contributions. So who is this to? It's to either the president, to the senators, or to the House reps. And they're doing it, they're saying, hey, so-and-so, I don't know who, we're donating to you so that you pressure our governor to take certain action, or, like we saw, don't take certain action, don't enforce certain laws. And he's proposing to make that illegal. That's probably a good thing. Well, again, how do you prove it's another thing? There's that aspect of law. Can the law be enforced? But usually these arise because this has happened. Laws are almost always responsive to something that has happened. So if you look at our situation here and start to think, it's like, oh, is that why the governor is taking action or not taking certain actions? It's interesting.
And that just revert back to the original thing we were talking about, we were choose the force or not.
Yeah, as long as someone's money wasn't tied to donating with the intent to influence that. That's essentially a bribe, right? If I give you money to not enforce the law or to take an action, that's a bribe.
You have to prove.
It's difficult. You need an email or a text. You need something that says, hey, I'm donating so that you.
It's interesting that he does not include, and he does not include lobbyists.
Well, lobbyists are a whole nother can of worms, but yes, that's another area of government we don't have lots of checks and balances on, right? We need lobbyists. So lobbyists generally don't make actual contributions themselves. They work for people who make contributions, but they don't make the contributions themselves. So it's a very fine game that's played with lobbying. My people won't be happy if you don't vote for this. You know, they communicate things. They know how to communicate those things. But this is one of the election bills up there. And when you go down, you'll see red. And Utah tries to make it pretty obvious. The first thing I'll tell you is whether something's amended or enacted. If it says it's enacted to read, that means it's a whole new law. If it says it's amended to read, that means it's an existing law and we're changing something. And so there's already a law on campaign contributions during the session or veto period prohibited. So you can't make a campaign contribution when Utah's in session or when the governor can veto, but 10 days after.
Is it to this law because it's similar and it's like already a good foundation, or
Yes.
do they do it for like political reasons?
Most of the time, it's because the drafting attorneys identified it's a similar subject and we already have something existing. So their job is to know the law and to say, oh, we already have something similar, we'll just add it in here, or do we have to create something new? Most of the time, that's chosen by the drafting attorneys. What happens with that? The red underline means it's new language. It's being added. And you can also amend, and if you get blue, that's a strike through. This is what they're proposing to delete from the existing law. The black is just the existing law that's not changing. If you're colorblind, then go off the underline and the strike through. But that is, so you can see here that they used to specifically say who, now they said more broadly a state official. But then you think state official and you go back up here, state official means, oh wait, the people we just got rid of. The legislator, lieutenant governor, attorney general, state auditor, or the state treasurer. Those are still there.
That's why
Um,
it's so difficult to read.
And they've now changed the definition to just be a state official, so they don't have to list it 5 times. And so they'll say state official more often. So right here it says it's unlawful for a person, lobbyists can't do it. Unlawful for a person, lobbyist, principal, or political committee to make a federal contribution, yada, yada, yada. If the person makes the federal contribution with the intent, like you say, to influence a state official to take or fail to take an action, or reward a state official for taking or failing to take an action. So can't have emails or texts if you're doing that, because you have to prove intent. But it at least makes it so people have to be a little more careful.
Does that bill, lists what the consequences?
Let's see. It says a violation of this section is a class A misdemeanor. So that's up to 1 year in prison. Or a fine of 10,000, if I remember right. So it's not a felony, but it's a class A misdemeanor.
That's if it goes to court.
So again, this is one of the funny things. Who would be able to bring this? Let's say that they violated this to get the governor to do something. Who would bring this to court to prosecute the person? The Attorney General. And if the Attorney General and the governor work hand in hand, it'll probably never be prosecuted, right? So some of these things make it so that if they don't like you, they can come after you. But if they do like you, no one cares. We don't enforce it. And that is something we see openly. Government officials don't have as much enforcement against them. Candidates for office tend to get enforced more often.
Gets to decide on punishment on the fine.
The money,
Yes.
the judge, if it's brought to the judge.
You mean the judge decides on that what is it, $10,000?
Yeah, I think a class A misdemeanor, you can be fined up to 10,000, if I remember right.
Oh, I see.
And the judge can decide how egregious your violation was and what misdemeanor.
Oh, more serious crime.
It can't be more serious. So the law only allows it to be a class A, nothing else. So if you're convicted of this, it's just a straight up class A. No one gets to decide. But the judge can decide whether you go to jail for 1 day or a year. So anywhere in that range, and what the fine is from 0 to 10,000. But no one gets to decide if it's a class A or not, because the law says that part.
Based on what?
Just right here, it's just what they chose. It's just random. They chose a class A misdemeanor, so that's what's there.
But they just pulled the,
That's what I'm
Penalty,
asking.
yeah,
Who
but
gets to
that's-
decide?
Outside the penalty, so there's another law that defines the class A misdemeanor and the maximum penalties for a class A misdemeanor. And then there's a law that defines the maximum penalty for a class B misdemeanor. The maximum penalty for a class C, that type of thing.
but I think what she's getting at is.
Yes.
Besides, it's only a,
Yeah, it's only a class A.
The bill sponsor.
Yeah, it's purely the bill sponsor.
okay, so there's not like a list. that
So
says-
he's not very serious, in my opinion.
So that's funny.
No.
He's talking about bribery, right?
Yes, this is bribery.
He's making class A, bribery is a class A.
Essentially, yep. This is an indirect bribery. So maybe it's not as bad as direct bribery, I don't know. But yes, they didn't consider it to be a felony. So it's not as bad as directly bribing them, apparently.
Contact your rep and ask them to do an amendment on this bill and change it for that.
Yeah, and you could say, let's make this, and let's give the people the power to bring
Yeah.
something, you can propose things like that. And not just the sponsor, you can ask any rep to do an amendment and make it a felony.
I know what committee it's going to.
Yeah, and that should tell us that, well, let's see, does it, I don't know if it tells us that yet. Yeah, so we're waiting for introduction, so it's gonna go to rules, and then rules will say where it goes. Once it's assigned by rules to that committee, you'll see it show up parent status. on that. Oh, yeah, so how do we know that? Let's see, so we go to committees. And we have all the different things here that you can click on, but if you go to all committees, they have these different things. Let's see, House Rules Committee. Let's say we're looking at the House. You click on House Rules Committee. Sorry. And they say members over here. These are the rules members for the House. These are the people that are probably a little more powerful. Yeah. It will show their meeting schedule. If they have a committee hearing coming up, you can link into it. You can join the committee by clicking on the link. It comes live once it goes live there. So the link won't be there until it's live, but they will show their calendar. Once they get bills assigned to them, you'll see that down there. And this is the same for all committees. You can go through this. And so again, remember with members, you can click on the member. He's the chair. Here's his contact info right there. And you just can email him about something of concern.
And the Senate Rules Committee would be the same.
Yep. Yep. And so if you want to look at the committee, you just go down to Senate. And again, honestly, with rules, you're probably not going to be talking to them about too many things because they're sending it to another committee. And it's that second committee that you're really going to look at. But yeah, Senate Rules Committee. Let's see if it goes there. I guess you have to hit select. And there's a few more senators on that. And these are the ones that get to decide where it goes. But yeah, but you can go through all the committees. You can see, so these are the ones that exist. You can see them here. There's a fair number of them because we like to pass a lot of laws. It's one of the things we like. So if you were concerned about, let's see. I'm trying to see what elections might fall under Government Operations Committee. Seeing what else may be there. You know, they've got School Security Task Force, they've got Business and Labor, confirmation committees are generally ones that confirm appointees. And that's another thing you can be involved in. If there's a confirmation hearing come up, you can actually go participate and say why someone should be confirmed to an office. It's a real thing. The senators recently were playing this game in Utah where they had a lot of media attention on a lot of GRAMA requests that people have been filing. GRAMA is the ability to get public information from the government. And if the government says no, we don't want to give it to you, you appeal it to a hearing committee, and the hearing committee has individuals appointed by the governor, and they're confirmed by the Senate. And the hearing committee will then listen and then order the government to say, yep, produce this information, you have to do it. And so there was a lot of information before the election that Utah didn't want out. And the Senate just stopped confirming people to the hearing committee. And the hearing committee fell below a quorum, and they couldn't meet to consider any appeals. And so Utah had no process to consider appeals of denied GRAMA requests prior to the election. Just games they play at times. But that is one of the things that happened. And so, yeah, we have, and I honestly do not know, looking at that, what the difference between the Senate Judicial Confirmation Committee and the Senate Judiciary Confirmation Committee is. Sounds like the same thing to me, but apparently it's not. And maybe some of them are just left over. Maybe they changed the name from a previous one and it's left over. I don't know. But you can look at these and go to the ones you want. So if you're interested in business and labor, say select. You'll see here, this one's a lot bigger committee. This one actually has some things already calendared. So they're meeting. They've issued a notice, 2 p.m. So this is right as the session starting, essentially. And we can open that. This notice is saying, you can participate remotely. We're going to have a meeting, but the notice isn't super helpful because they don't tell us what bills they're considering yet. But at least you can see them working on it, and this is the type of thing that will come, and then they'll list the bills. And again, everything's hyperlinked. And then one other thing I forgot to show with the bills that's super helpful if you go to one, and you're seeing what happens, this one says enact. So this is actually doing a new law. So maybe this won't be helpful. This one's all new and tell you when it takes effect. Let me find one that is amending. So they have all these things here that it's saying these code sections are affected. It will tell you all the code sections that get amended. It will show them to you down here. This is a long one. They're deleting a lot of things. But what you can do with it, I guess it's up here, is if you want to see the context that this is in, because sometimes you can't fully follow what's going on, you can click on this. I guess, sorry. So I thought it hyperlinked to it, but if you want to see what 53B-1-301 is, you can go to bills, or sorry, code, and you can say the code, and you can go down to 53B, chapter 1, and 301. And so this is what it's trying to amend. And then you can look at the previous sections, you can look at the next section. And one of the neat things here is that you can actually look at it and you can see that this law was just changed last session. So they will tell you in the actual code that it was amended by Chapter 3, 2024 General Session. You can click on that and it will take you to the previous bill that amended it. So you can kind of follow the process and see what games they've been playing along the way, or what's going on with it. It's pretty nice that way. But one other thing to know, if you're looking at code, and we'll talk about this again more next Thursday, but let's say you're here in 53B and you're trying to find something. And you're going, oh, this is a lot of stuff to look at. I don't know where it is. They have a download option here. This is for past legislation. And if you click on PDF, what it will do is it will open up the whole thing, and it has a search function that you can search their website if you want, but you can also just click on the code and then say Control F and type in, if you're looking for student in particular or something, you can type it in and search for it. In this instance, there's 949 uses of the word student, so maybe you'd want to say something else. But you can find where they use, and so if you have a certain term you want to look at and see everywhere they use it, you can download the PDF on that and go through it pretty quickly searching for things. And it works a little bit better this way than their search function. Their search function delivers way more results and it's harder to go through, I think. But so yeah, just multiple ways to do it. I like to do the download, the PDF download. You can also download it as an RTF or an XML file. And if you click into it, if you click on chapter 1 and then click download, you'll only get chapter 1, not the rest of the chapters. And so you can also narrow it down by what you're looking for. But right here, if you're trying to search it, it doesn't work as well. And then they do have the thing on the website to go to the historical code. Now on here too, you can go to budget. You can see the budget, follow some of that. They have another website called transparent.utah.gov where they show how they spend all the money, who they pay it to. There's a lot of information there.
And spend all the money for what?
Just how the cities and the government spends the money. So the contractors they're paying, anyone that gets money from the government, you can look up any government employee, see how much they make, that type of thing. So it's transparent on the expenditures, assuming it's categorized correctly. Transparent.utah.gov.
Kind of a two-part question. Your legislation passed that requires funding to run that legislation. Is that a separate process for the funding? And the second part of that question is, if they're separate and the bills passed, but funding isn't, what happens to that one?
Yeah, it's a good question. What happens with bills that require funding is that let's see, I'll just go back to one here. They will add what they call a fiscal note to the bill. Let's see. I don't know if this one will have anything or not. But if there's a fiscal note added to the bill over here with the fiscal analyst, this one doesn't have one. Then they're telling the reps what it would cost if they vote for it. It's not a separate thing at the time. But one of the powers the governor has is when they come up, so let's say they pass a new law that requires funding, it'll get rolled into appropriations for the next year, and they'll pass a bill to appropriate money for it. The governor in Utah, by the Utah Constitution, actually has a line item veto over appropriations. So he can choose to say, yeah, that law passed over my veto, but I'm going to override the appropriation for it. And he can strike out the appropriation for that one thing. Any appropriation that gets struck out by the governor gets kicked back to the legislature, and they can still override it with a 2/3 majority if they want. But the governor has a line item veto. Our president does not have a line item veto. Supreme Court said the president doesn't have the power to have a line item veto. But Utah specifically gives the governor that with funding. But the funding side is the government can always play a game with funding and choose not to fund something. And so you can have a law with no funding and it just kind of dead if that happens. But if a law passes with the fiscal note, it's assumed it will be included at least in the next year's appropriations to say this is how much we need. But any legislative personnel can choose to amend that and try and pull it, or the governor can veto it too, line item veto it.
I think HB
Did it? Let's go look at HB 18 and see here. Petroleum storage tank amendments. Let's see. Right there. Okay, there it is. So this one actually appropriates it in the bill. So this one's a little different in that it's an actual appropriations bill to add. This is kind of like adding an appropriation thing, as opposed to a bill that, we're going to create a new task force and the task force requires ongoing funding. So yes, you are correct. This one has appropriations, but this is straight up just saying we want to take 4 million and appropriate it as we put forth in this bill, apparently for storage tanks. Quite a few things changing there. I don't know, some of these do get a little hard to follow. I guess petroleum can be stored now above ground since we're changing it from underground to petroleum. Some of those things you look at and you can kind of track what's happening to say, oh, underground didn't work because now we have above ground storage facilities. Probably why that's happening. But this one, so I guess you could look to the right for the fiscal note or to here in the summary, money appropriated in this bill. It's going to tell them there as well. Other questions or comments?
So several months ago, I'm assuming the people will be committee, they did an audit to find they did an audit to see if we were getting the best bang for our buck for putting the application in administration. My bad, the finance committee really decided on the whole thing. How do I find out how that came out? Would that be on the committee?
Yeah, so you can go to the committees. You can go back to previous committees. Let's see, come over here. So if you're on committees, they let you choose the year. So if you want to look at committees for the year 2024, you can go there and then you can start going through these things. This one had an education interim committee, which might be what you're talking about. You can see the members, the overview, the related links. Here's all this, meeting materials. A performance audit of the Utah System of Higher Education. So you can then just click on that. and open it here. And this is their report that came out of this. And then, yeah, you can go back through these notes and things and see what happened there. Yeah, just go back and select those previous years on that. Any other questions, comments with any of this?
Can you find a bill by the subject?
So if you want to find a bill by subject, again, the easiest way is to do the legislative tracker. But you can also, if you're here, they just have this search up here. And you can type a search in.
It also doesn't have a subject when I look it up on my phone.
Does it?
It has subjects.
Under bills?
Yeah,
Let's see.
so it has bills, committees, code, and then it has subject, so you can look for it that way.
Yeah, so code has a keyword search. Let's see, bills has a keyword search. This keyword search, it's the same as if you click up here, it's taken to the same place. And if you search education, well, I didn't spell that right. You can see it pulls up 116,000 things. And so you can try and refine it down, but I've never loved their search function a ton because it's hard. Their filters aren't great. This is one place they do struggle a little. You can obviously filter it to just bills. And then once you're in here, you can filter it by only show me the 2025 general session. And so this does help. They have all these sessions here that you can choose. But right now, my results, let's see, can I update this? Oh, it's still, let's see, bills. Yeah, okay, 1 of 88 results. So then there's 88 you go through. And it shows you bills that have the term education in it. But this is a keyword search. And so you will get ones. Yeah, this is, so the site does keyword search. The bill tracker does subject or code provision. But the search isn't as strong on that. Let's see. And then you can also look at if you want bill text, introduce bills, you know, different categories of bills if you're in bills, amended or enrolled or whatever. So you can drill down, but it's still a little clunky to do. But you can certainly search that way. Any other questions, comments? I think the session starts in about 2 weeks. Is that right? Yeah, so we're gonna see a lot of bills coming out here shortly that get made public. And so next Thursday, we'll go through a lot more detail. We'll actually just pull up some of the bills and talk about the language in them, get an idea of kind of how to follow and understand some of the basics of legal stuff. That one will be at the Riverton Library, if I remember right. Is that right? Riverton Library. Not all the rooms are available in the same library all the time. So that will be next week. And one of the things is, since you came, if you have a question on a bill, just email me.
What's your contact information? We missed it.
My contact info is, so you can find me at austinhepworth.com. But my contact info is ahepworth@believe.legal. ahepworth@believe.legal.
So, you know, sometimes we send email to the rules committee, let's say, and then one of them, so I mean, I know who my rep and my senator is, Senator, but the rules committee have got many people, many members on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes one of them, that's not my rep or not my senator, would send me back an email and ask me, what is your zip code?
Yep.
At that point, I do not respond. is that a correct thing to do? My reason why I do not respond is I conclude that you want to know whether I'm your constituent. And if I'm not, you're gonna ignore me.
So potentially they give more weight for sure to their own constituents. There's no doubt.
So should I respond?
I would highly recommend it. Because the more transparent and open you are with them, the more they'll work with you. And it's fine to say, my rep is so-and-so, but since you're on the rules committee, this is a super important issue to me. And I'm asking you to please consider it.
Another question I have, do you recommend that when my rep respond to me, which I do not agree, because he disagreed with the comments that's why he respond to me, you know, giving me all his reason, and I respond back to rebuttal his reasoning. Is that a wise thing to do or not?
It depends on the situation. Sometimes they're telling you, I already made my decision, here's why. And if you try and keep them going and going and going, they're going to get burned out from you because they've already decided and rebuttal's not going to help. If they're in a place of saying, well, these are, you know, this is what I'm thinking, but I'm still trying to decide, or if there's some indication that there's still some potential play, then I'd say, yeah, try and convince them. But I know from talking personally to representatives, they get burned out by constituents who demand a lot of time from them. They don't have a lot of time. And so you have to choose when you're going to present things and put that out there, because it can be damaging if you take too much of their time. They will remember you for that. And you'll get this nice, you know, they'll put indicators in their phone, don't answer or whatever. And you can lose the ability to contact them by taking too much time.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, but typically once you present it and if they actually take the time to write back and respond, they're most likely telling you, I've already made my decision, and they're trying to convince you to still vote for them at that point. They're probably not asking for rebuttal, is my bet, unless they specify that. But yeah, but they're crazy busy. And so if you do get a response, it's a good sign. It means you pricked a chord or something, you know.
So when they are responding, are they themselves are responding, Austin, or is it their staff?
Federally, it's their staff, guaranteed. If you reach out to federal, you'll never, I don't know if a normal constituent's not going to get a response from someone that's not staff, but statewide, House, it's almost certainly the House rep. Senate, most of the time it's the Senate, maybe it's staff, but they're the ones mostly that monitor it here. And again, if you are a constituent, put it in the email subject line. I'm your constituent. They will read those generally. And that's an important thing to do. And it's helpful to kind of the subject line, vote yes, vote no, HB 218, whatever. Make it real easy for them to get to the point.
So what you're saying is, Austin, they actually open all their email themselves.
If they open it, it's usually themselves, yes.
Because Utah is so small that they don't have hired people.
Yeah. Because the elected officials here are part-time. They're in for technically 45 days. They're not paid a whole bunch. We don't allocate this huge budget to them having staff and other things. And so they certainly have some interns and whatnot, you know, some people that go up and do some things. And again, there are times, I'm not saying that it's never staff, but in my experience contacting reps, it's almost always the rep responding to me.
So another piece of advice, please. I do want to stay on the good terms with my House rep and my Senate. So when they come back with a response which is not in line with, I would like them to vote on. Shall I respond, thank you, or just quiet?
I usually respond to say, thanks for taking the time to explain it to me.
So whether it is they are agreeing or not, that's what your advice me to do.
Yeah. Because if you show them that you appreciate the conversation, they're going to become more open over time. If they can trust that you're not going to just blow up on them and send them back a billion points and whatever. Again, it's a big deal that they're taking the time to tell you why they feel the way they do. Not all of them do that for sure. And so the fact that they are doing that shows they have some level of respect for you. And that's a good thing when you're working with people, that you want to keep some level of respect for sure. You don't want to become the one that just burns the bridges. And some people feel they need to. Some go up and just advocate hard and burn all the bridges. And they like, this is the hill I'm going to die on. And maybe you need to do that sometimes. But generally, the legislative process, even if a bill makes it through that's horrible, it's not uncommon for it to be changed later and for things to still happen. And so part of it is trusting that the process works itself out, whether it be through executive checks and balances, future elections, courts, different things. There's all kinds of things that play into that still. And it can be the end of the world, maybe. You know, there are some things that once they're out of the bag, they never come back for sure. But in general, I think we can have some faith that even if something doesn't go as hoped for right now, we can still impact it moving forward. But I certainly appreciate y'all for coming. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, and there is, if you want to get emails, so if you want to join the legislative reviews that we do weekly to go through the bills, will be online. If you want to join those, you do need to put your email so I can email you those links. But if you also want to get information about ongoing stuff, please sign that. We are going to be working in the coming months to start to be a little more proactive on helping to select good representatives so that we can help to identify people and get people in a position to run before we have to file to run and things. And we're hoping to start to shift the course of, moving forward here in Utah. So love to have you join us and let us know. And if you want the links, you can put it in the comments. I can certainly get that from this when the meeting closes. The comments will still be there for me. So put that in the chat if you want with your email, and I can send you the links for future meetings. So thank you.